You're listening to LeaderCast, episode 173. Welcome to LeaderCast, Transforming Missions podcast with Tim Bias and Sarah Thomas, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers. Today we're having a conversation with Jessica Moffatt. Jessica is the lead pastor at First United Methodist Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She shares with us her perspectives on courageous leadership and on accountability, both from a personal perspective in terms of how she holds herself personally accountable, as well as how she then applies that to the teams that she leads. As a reminder, you can find show notes for this episode at transformingmission.org/podcast, and you're looking for episode 173. Without any further wait, here's our conversation with Jessica Moffatt.
Jessica, welcome to LeaderCast.
Hey, Tim, it's good to be with you.
And it's good to be with you. Good to see you. As we get started on all of our podcasts, we ask a couple of questions. The first one is, who are you and what do you get paid to do?
I get paid to do a lot of things. I am the lead pastor at First United Methodist Church in Tulsa, and this is my second time to serve this church. I was a young pastor there back in 1985. I came there as a 25-year-old, and I stayed 12 years. And then I went away and served other churches for 19 years, and now I've been back for 5 years. So I stayed there for 17 years. And it's just a really good thing that I was there for 12 years before, because it's a pretty complicated machine, and I'm not quite sure how a new pastor could have stayed. So that's one of the things I do. But here are the other passions that I carry continually. I train churches on how to mobilize people for ministry beyond the walls of the church. I am a certified mediator in 2 states, state of Georgia, state of Oklahoma. I am a certified spiritual director, and the way that's landed for me right now is that I facilitate retreats for burned out clergy. The other thing that I am is something, it's a weird word. I am what's called a discernmentarian. So I help people and churches make decisions not by parliamentary procedure, but by various processes of discernment that I know about and that I learned about ages ago when I was in the middle of churches in conflict and had to learn quite a bit about that. So the difference between a parliamentarian and a discernmentarian is that a parliamentarian wants to make sure that everybody's voice is heard. The minority voice needs to be heard. A discernmentarian, I just want to help you hear the voice of God. So I'm a very particular kind of a coach. I help coach people when they are in what we would call the liminal place of their lives, and help them navigate how to survive the despair of liminality, and then how to move forward. So that's a long answer, but I've been in ministry for 38 years.
And I have to say that it's been almost 20 years ago that I learned from you that Finhagen model of discernment that I've used since that time. We've used it in a large church in Cincinnati, not only to sell property, but also to bring a church that was going to close into the family of the church that we were a part of. We used that to even discern what the mission of the church was going to be as we move forward. And I think I just need to say this because I've experienced this with you before, Jessica, but Sarah can verify this. There was a distinct moment in using that discernment process where we felt and experienced the Spirit of God in such a way that we were all on the same page.
When I first read in that model that if true discernment steps have been followed, that you will come to a unanimous decision, I just thought, yeah, right. Not in my setting. We were at worship war, and when we hit a unanimous decision, I was sold. I will be a fan of this model the rest of my life. And that was in the 90s.
Yeah, and I remember using it with a group of clergy having a conversation after general conference of, how are we going to live together, and how do we navigate the differences that we're experiencing. It's been very helpful throughout the years, so it's good to make the connection to where that was first learned.
Well, it's one of my life goals to get that into the hands of as many human beings as possible. So share and share.
Jessica, we do a lot of talking and working with courageous leaders. So another question as we move into our conversation today, what does being a courageous leader mean to you?
Doesn't it all start with humility? A genuine relinquishment of your life into the hands of God for God's use. I think that is just the basis for everything. So eventually that shows up as courage and shows up as strength. But I don't think that's your starting place. I think the starting place is to offer ourselves to God to do whatever needs to be done, regardless of whether or not we're comfortable with it. The way that plays out in my own life is that I regularly go to the floor in front of my fireplace, flat on my back, and I get as empty as I humanly know how to do. And I just ask God, is there anything at all that you would like to whisper to me, tell me, bring a picture to my mind? And I usually stay until something comes and I get a sense either of guidance or direction, or at least I'll call it this, an alignment of my will to God's will. It's like I offer all the big opinions that I know I already have. And I say, so in this moment, I release all those big opinions to you. And I'm ready to hear or be guided toward whatever might be your will. So I would say the first step of courage is to wait and listen before God. And then if I were to go to a second step, it would be about self-awareness. So are we aware of how we are made with regard to our ego? Do we power grab? How involved is the ego in our own sense of self? How am I wired? What do I do under stress? I love all those temperament type assessments. Some of them are helpful to people, some maybe not. But what do I do when someone disagrees with me, or I find myself in a place of stress that's going to require courage? Am I actually operating out of my childhood dysfunctions or my family dysfunctions, or am I so self-aware that I can be very present to what God might be doing in the moment, and that I can listen really well? One illustration of that might be if you have in your family a narcissist who has ever had any power over you. If you're a pastor and you engage with a narcissist, it's just very likely that every emotion you've ever had about your family narcissist will be put into the person who is in front of you. I had a family member who's a pastor, and she had a captain in her church, and every time she dealt with him, she had to call me and debrief. And finally, I just said, well, let's just talk about your trigger. So can we be self-aware that the behavior that we're doing really is out of a sense of leading? So I think those two things happen. There comes this time when you realize, oh, I'm going to have to do this thing, and it has risk, and it may come at a cost to me. I don't think that's where we begin. So I would say that those three things would be the foundation for courage, that we start with humility, and then we move on to just a really keen self-awareness of how we're wired. And all that happens before the last part, which is when you really start doing the boots on the ground kind of work. And if I were to think about the steps in my own life about what helps me act courageously, they're pretty clear for me. First of all, I think a courageous leader starts by getting all the information possible and listens really, really well. My belief about every human being is that they want to be thoroughly heard, and that is, I think it's courageous for us to thoroughly hear a person, especially if they're opposite in opinion than we have. I think another step is that we create these open lines of communication with people so that as things really do need to be done, that we have a relationship that has been built. And so it's not just an announcement of where we're going. It's been a process of getting to know you and understanding the needs of everybody involved and understanding the hardship that where we're going might put on someone. So that also requires us to be really open with all the information that we have. Sometimes we have information that other people don't have, but the honest thing is to really bring that out to everybody early. And then the last part of it, I think I would call confronting the reality head on in a real honest and authentic way. I think we lose our edge as leaders when we are not honest. I think if we pretend things are the way that they are not, then that will cause, I think that's what's caused troubles in churches forever, is that we have kind of a fairy tale mindset and that we think things are fine when they are not. If I were to see those steps all the way through, I would say that for me, I do best when I take an action that requires courage pretty soon, as soon as I can get a sense of leading with it. For example, I've told my staff that if something needs to be addressed that's hard, that if I can get a quiet moment during the day, we will deal with it before the day is over. And we won't wait. The other piece that I want to add is that I think personal suffering is a great advantage in all the things that we have to do. I think it gives us a different kind of courage and has the potential to make us really great leaders. I know that is a really strange thing to say because none of us want suffering. But when it comes, it teaches us lessons of courage that can come to us no other way. And I believe that those sufferings make us potentially resilient people. And resilience is what we're going to need as we live out courageous lives. Because every time we navigate a hard situation, regardless of how it ends up, we just get more brave. And every time we have to dig really deep to something that has hurt us, we navigate the next thing because we have had to dig really deep. And some of that comes from experience because I've now been doing this, as I said, for 38 years. And by God's grace, there's just not much that hurts or bothers me anymore. I can go into a situation and say to do what I'm about to do is going to create angst and people aren't going to like me or maybe not go with me. And I'm okay with that. I read something a long time ago that I liked, and it was 3 steps to courage. The first one was called try courage. And that's what's required to take the first step, knowing that you could really get it wrong or you could fail. The second thing was called trust courage. And that was the courage that is required when you relinquish control to other people. It's when you delegate and you train a team and you let go of leadership to a team. And the last one was called tell courage. And that's the courage that you need when you have to speak openly with conviction about a belief or an idea. And that's the one that I think is the most scary. I think we need to decide ahead of time how we're going to act when we take it. I have a sister who's a district superintendent, has been for a while, and she had to remove a pastor from a church for sexual misconduct. And she was in the grocery store, and a woman picking out lettuce just yelled at her in the grocery store. And in those moments, she just had to make all kinds of decisions. And it just took a lot of courage, I thought, on her part to have known ahead of time that this would go well in the church with the church people, and then to get slammed in the grocery store, and then to do what we do when we have to have support, which was to call and debrief with me. I think we've all had situations where we've had to do the right thing, not tell anybody, and then take a hit. And I think if we just know that ahead of time, that when it comes, it can hurt less. All right, so those were some of the things on my mind.
Part of what we've been doing is asking ourselves the question, what do courageous leaders need to know, do, and understand? And as we've done this, at least throughout this 2021 year, we've come up with different characteristics and the characteristic we want to talk about today is creating a culture of accountability. So that's where the conversation will go as we move into, well, Jessica, one of the things I thought of when we were thinking about people to be on a podcast was that I could put you in just about every category we wanted, whether it was self-awareness, whether it was purpose, whether it's accountability. And so we've come to the place of talking about leadership, and I think we shared with you the definition that Brene Brown uses about accountability. She describes it as you own your own mistakes, apologize, and make amends. And this is the bias piece coming through here now. Many of the people with whom I work have a challenge in admitting and facing their mistakes without shame or without taking it on to their own character. So just as we get started with that conversation about creating a culture of accountability, that's just something that's in my mind as we get started. So thank you for telling us who you are and your idea of courageous leadership.
It takes courage to hold yourself accountable, and it takes courage to hold other people accountable. To have a culture of accountability, you actually do have to be on top of things. So just the very notion of accountability presumes the expectations. So we just have to start right there. Are the expectations clear that we have? First of ourselves. I want to talk about that in just a moment. But then the expectations of the people, let's say, for example, people on our staff, since I'm a part of a church that has a large staff. Do we have super clear job descriptions that are getting updated all the time? And do people have supervisors? And is regular supervision happening? So many people, I think, want to do the right thing, both staff and church members. They're just not super clear on what it is. And they don't even know the little incremental goals to get to what it is. And so we've got a pretty clear system in our church now where we've very clearly gone through a visioning process. We have articulated what is important to us as a church and why. And then everyone's actions, all their goals flow out of those important things. And then we made sure that everybody had this cheerleader, encourager, processor person to be with them. We also have a culture that I think allows people to try things and to make mistakes. In my world, my staff know that there are really two kinds of mistakes. One is what I call simple human error. And the other one is something that's like malicious or willful or not doing the work. Some other guys, they're really not going to be a team player. And pretty much if there's trust going on, then that person really doesn't stay on staff. I mean, that's just a really important vital part. One piece of accountability is just to get feedback all the time and to be open to changing direction all the time. Go ahead and set your standards high. But if you miss the mark or they're unreachable or too high. So I would say what has helped us the most, though, is the alignment and the open conversation. So if we expect our teams and our church people to deliver on their commitments, we actually have to deliver on our commitments also. So years ago, when I realized that I was living a very fast-paced, high-stressed, unsustainable pace in ministry, I went away for the summer for 3 weeks. And now every summer since then, I've gone away for 3 weeks in the summer to work just on my own accountability. And in those years, I have created for myself a worksheet. I call it a worksheet for personal prayerful visioning. And I have 11 things that I work on all the time. I call them like horses. These are 11 horses that are running all the time, and they all need attention. And the good news is that out of all 11, only one is related to my work. Everything else is just related to my personal life. And I can read you my list in a minute if you want to, but here are the parts of my my visioning worksheet. So the first question is, what is the desired end result? What do you want? Second question is the biggest question of life, which is your why. Why do you want it? Third question is, what progress needs to happen in the next 13 weeks and also in the next 6 months and also in the next full year to make this happen? So like what has to happen at the end of every week? What has to happen at the end of every quarter? What are the benchmarks? That's the third one. The fourth one is, what are the daily actions to make it happen? The fifth one is, what are the specific steps to take to get the daily actions in motion? So what has to happen to take the action? For example, ages ago, I wanted to be a swimmer. I felt like that was a really good way to be healthy and also to not strain my back. And so like I would say, well, I've actually got to join a pool. I've got to join the Y. I have to own some goggles. I have to find and protect the time. So those are like the daily specific actions. The sixth one was just for fun. Do you want to create a reward for yourself if you meet one of these goals along the way? And what might your reward be? And then I always have a little note to myself that sometimes the end result is the actual reward. And then the last step is just restate your commitment to the vision and include your start and ending date so that by this day, this end result will have happened because I have done these things all along the way. And so every Friday, I pull out my book. I have this thing I call just the life notebook, and it has all my 11 things. And I tell myself how I'm doing on each one of those. And it just changes your stress level. So here are my 11. You want to hear them?
Sure.
Food, exercise, the word heart, and that has to do with my personal relationship with Jesus. The fourth one is my family. So if I want to be super close to like my niece, what are all the things I will do to help make that happen? The fifth one is called friends. The next one's called fun. The next one is called thinking. So will I guard my thinking, or will I just scroll endlessly on social media or watch anything or do escape behavior in my head? The next one is called pamper. And then the next one is called business/house. And then the last one, the 11th one, is called work. So it's not the first one. And it's not 5 of them. It's really just one. So if I will be accountable to myself about my own heart and life and health and all of that, then I think I will survive.
So you go ahead.
How I end every one of these podcasts is, remember, who you are is how you lead. And you just offered us a beautiful illustration of that very statement. Who you are is how you lead. So thank you.
I love that. So we will not be worth much as pastors if our marriages are a wreck, or if our children are resentful, or if our blood pressure is sky high because we're not taking care of ourselves. So all of those things really are a part of it.
Yeah.
So you sharing that about your accountability, how does that get translated to the people with whom you work, your staff or congregational leaders?
So every January, I give them this worksheet for their work goals. So we work on our alignment, and then they work with their supervisor to fill out a single worksheet for every individual goal. It's fashioned just a little bit different, but not too much. We ask each staff member to do 3 to 5 big goals, and then to also keep your side list of all your other small goals. And then we meet with our folks at least every other week just to check in. How are you doing? How are those goals coming? That's some of the best accountability there. When I got to our church, there was really no good system of supervision. I don't like that word very much, supervision. It's almost like a better word would be like a partnering with someone, a coach, or someone who deeply cares about you and your work and is going to just help you fulfill the calling that you have, and also help tie it into the entire big structure. What we did this last week is we went around our ministerial table, which was about 13 people, and everyone shared their 5 goals with each other. And so what happens then is the cross visioning. So someone would say, I didn't even know that was one of your goals because that's one of my goals. And then we can do this across our departments. Or if you're going to do that goal, that means that I could actually accomplish this other thing, but I didn't even have as a goal because I didn't know you were doing that.
How do you want others to hold you accountable as a leader?
I think we all need a few really safe people. I want my staff certainly to call me out when I'm not being consistent. Have you heard this statistic that how big your blind spot is? It's like huge. I think the statistic was that you can see about 35% of your life and that the rest of it you are not able to see about yourself. And once I heard that statistic and we laughed about it in staff meeting, we just said, y'all, let's be a people who can call each other out on our blind spots. And so we do that. If they're really painful, that happens in private, but we give a context of permission to do that. But in my really deeper personal life, I've got about 3 people who have the authority and the I trust and who will really tell me the truth about my life. And when I do something that's inconsistent with what they know I want to be, or if I speak something that's just not really true, either they think I'm fooling myself or trying to fool them, they'll call me out on it. And I just think everybody needs to have somebody who is that honest with them.
As I listen to that, and of course I'm projecting now, that also grows out of that humility that you talked about early on, which creates also a culture of vulnerability and transparency, which if you can enter into relationship or work with vulnerability and that transparency with humility, I think you could probably pretty much conquer the world, because that develops the trust. Is that what you have found?
Yes, that's it. I love strange to say, I love the aging process, because a lot of your pride just gets melted out of you as you make mistakes and you learn. It doesn't come initially and it doesn't come naturally, but I think with some openness to the Holy Spirit and using your suffering, you certainly can get there. The opposite of what we're talking about is something that I would call a culture of suspicion, that some church staffs work that way. I will say that I knew about a senior pastor who, at 4:55 p.m., would walk the campus to see who was and wasn't still in the office.
That created a whole lot of goodwill, didn't it?
Yeah. So I just said, if I don't trust you, you don't work here. You don't show me, reason not to trust you. I start from a place of trust. So.
Are you ready for the rapid fire questions?
All right, let's go.
Jessica, what was the color crayon that you always picked first as a kid?
Purple.
What food is always in your refrigerator, or what food do you eat all the time?
I always have half and half in my refrigerator because a cup of coffee is just not right without it.
And who's the one person you'd want to be with you on a deserted island?
My sister. My sister is a United Methodist pastor.
What is the last thing that you said to a loved one?
My daughter's love language is food. And so I said to her, what are you cooking?
What's one habit you've picked up during the pandemic?
So I really was not a Zoom girl at all. And now I Zoom with everybody. Friends, my relatives, every family event now we're Zooming. So I love that.
What are you reading right now?
So right now I have revisited the book called The First 90 Days, because I feel like I'm in my first 90 days again. Like I'm almost starting a new church after the pandemic. Plus I'm onboarding a lot of new staff.
So what's one of your hobbies or little known skills that somebody might not know about?
Let's see, a hobby I have. One of my favorite things to do is ride on a recumbent bicycle outside. So it's not the kind of recumbent bicycle that's real low and has the high flag. It's a really tall recumbent bicycle. So that's one of my favorite hobbies.
Well, Jessica, I can't thank you enough for not only sharing your time, but sharing your wisdom, your heart, your grace, and your stories with us and with our listeners. Is there any last word that you would like to leave our listeners with?
The most important question that I ever began to formulate that changed my life along the way was the question, why? I think when you find your why, then everything else unfolds as it should.
Jessica, I am reminded of our few minutes together today how much I miss you.
Oh,
I am
thank you. I feel the same way.
I am a better human being because of the interactions I've had with you over the last now 25 years. And I am extremely grateful. And for you to give time for us today is a gift. And so thank you very much for today.
I feel the same way. And I just thank you for a little time with you. And Sarah, good to be with you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Talk to you
you.
later. All righty.
You have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I hope the last 2 episodes on accountability are helping you to reframe your views on accountability. That is, if they need reframing. As always, let me leave you with a couple of questions to consider to apply what Jessica has shared with us today. The first question is this: who are the 2 or 3 people in your life that you trust to speak into your life and help you practice accountability? Second, what questions are you asking yourself to practice accountability, and what areas are important for you to consider? And then finally, if you supervise others, what's one step that you can take to build a culture of accountability? Once again, as a reminder, you can find these questions along with anything that was mentioned in this episode, including something that Jessica mentioned at the very beginning, the Finhagen model. You can find all of that on the show notes page at transformingmission.org/173. And remember, who you are is how you lead. Bye for now.